USGS Hydrography Seminar on the NHDPlus High Resolution for May 23rd, 2017. Again, I'm Al Ray, the co-lead for the NHD. Can we have the next slide, please? So today, these are the people who will be speaking. I just introduced myself. Also speaking will be Ariel Dumboya, who's acting Senior Hydrography Project Lead at the NGTOC, the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. Also Karen Adkins, who's a contractor and very much part of our team at USGS, and Tatiana Damasio, who's a NHD point of contact with our team there at the NGTOC. So if we could go ahead and move to the next slide. This just gives you an idea of what we'll be talking about today, and we'll start with an overview of the NHDPlus High Resolution, which I will give, and then after that we'll go into the workflow and how the data are produced, data access, the review and the QC effort on the beta products that we're releasing, and something called refresh, which we'll explain, and a new attribute called the visibility filter. Also, I'll ask that if you have questions, that you send those questions to us through the chat window, which is on the upper part of your screen. If you have the WebEx homepage visible, if you've made it full screen, if you put your cursor at the top of that screen, then there will be a menu that will come down and show you can open the chat window there and give us, send us any questions. We'll leave time at the end of the presentation for answering those questions. So you can send those, you can put those into the chat anytime during presentation, but we'll answer them at the end. Could we have the next slide, please? So I wanted to just start out and just give you a brief introduction to the NHDPlus High Resolution. It's basically available. We've just released it in beta version for these 7 hydrologic regions that are shown in dark blue there on that inset map. We are continuing to work on the rest of the conterminous US, which we expect to complete sometime in 2018. And then we'll be following that with working to complete the data for Alaska, Hawaii, and in the U.S. territories in the following years. What NHDPlus High Resolution is basically a scalable geospatial hydrography framework. It is built from the High Resolution NHD, also the Watershed Boundaries and Watershed Boundary Dataset, and the 3-depth elevation data. And it really brings modeling down to a very local neighborhood level, but still allows us to nest all of that information into a national context, and it's a connected national network. It is very similar to the NHDPlus version 2, if you're familiar with that, but it just has a lot more detail, a lot more detailed input data sets and output data sets. So next slide, please. So what I want to do here is just talk a little bit about the history of the NHD and to give you an idea of where we are now. So there's more history before this, but the NHD as we know it really was first released nationally in 2000 at the 1 to 100,000 scale. And after that, there were 2 separate efforts that took place, and one was known as the NHD High Resolution, and that one focused really on producing a higher level of detail, larger scale data going into the NHD. That was first focused at the 1 to 24,000 scale, but it also very quickly evolved in many localities and several states to be even larger scale, higher resolution data, to the point where today the NHD High Resolution is quite a hybrid data set of several different scales. For the conterminous U.S., it's all at least 1 to 24,000 scale or larger, and there are several whole states that are at much larger scale than that. At the same time that was going on, a separate group was working on adding additional functionality to the network and additional network navigation capabilities and a set of attributes that we call value-added attributes. So what we're doing now is we're bringing those two lines back together so that we can go forward as a community using a single hydrographic framework. But this new framework will have the ability to generalize to many different scales. So next slide, please. So the NHDPlus, just give you a little bit of background about it, and these next several slides really apply to both the medium resolution NHDPlus and the high resolution, which is new, what we're just now building. So conceptually, they're both the same, and in what we do is we combine the NHD hydrography, the watershed boundaries from the WBD, and the elevation data from 3DEP to create an integrated set of several data sets. The most important one of these data sets is the catchments. So a catchment is created for each segment and each NHD flow line, so each segment in the stream network. Next slide, please. So here's a picture of several catchments, and you can see there's one catchment for each line segment in the NHD network. There's also a catchment for each coastal line segment as well. These cover the entire continental U.S., so that if you drop a drop of water anywhere on the U.S., you would instantly know where in the stream network that water would flow to. And that is by intersecting with the catchment areas. So catchments really are important because they allow us to track the areas, the land areas that drain to the stream network, and that way we can relate conditions on the landscape and landscape processes to the stream network. This is really the first step in modeling the complete hydrologic system. Next slide, please. So here is a basic comparison of NHDPlus version 2, the medium resolution data set that's been around now for about a dozen years, and the new high resolution NHDPlus that we're just creating. So nationally, the number of catchments in the medium res is about 2.7 million. We'll be going to about 20 million, or 20 to even possibly as many as 30 million in high resolution NHDPlus when that's finally complete. We'll be using a 10-meter resolution elevation model, or DEM, versus the 30-meter that was used for version 2. And of course, we use that hybrid scale, high resolution NHD, which is 1 to 24,000 scale or better, versus the 1 to 100,000 scale that was used for NHDPlus medium resolution. And we have updated versions of the WBD, and basically our catchment size will go from about 1.2 square miles to around 0.2 of a square mile, approximately, in the high resolution NHDPlus. The size of catchments is obviously going to be quite variable in the high resolution NHDPlus because the high resolution NHD itself has very differing stream density or density of flow lines in the NHDPlus. And then as far as flow estimates, we have mean annual and mean monthly for the NHDPlus medium resolution, but for high resolution right now we're only doing the mean annual. We'll probably be adding the mean monthly later at a later time. So next slide, please. So I want to show you just some applications of the NHDPlus, so using the medium resolution, just so you can see some of the things that it has been used for that might give you ideas about things that could be done with the high resolution NHDPlus. So next slide, please. So this is showing the area in the northeastern U.S. that was done with the Sparrow model, which is a water quality model, and it uses flows from the NHDPlus as well as the catchment areas. Next slide. So this is just some of the results of Sparrow modeling in the Northeast, and it shows where phosphorus and nitrogen are coming from on the landscape. Next slide, please. And you can also use the Sparrow model to see what type of sources are contributing in different areas. So this is showing atmospheric point sources, developed lands, and agriculture by state for the Connecticut River Basin that's as it is delivered to the Long Island Sound. So it's a very useful way of modeling water quality. Next slide, please. So this is an application. These are some results from an application called the Icy Water, which is an application. It's a desktop application that's used for incident response. When there's a spill, such as the spill that where acid mine drainage from the Gold King mine was accidentally spilled into the Animas River in Colorado a year and a half or so ago. This application was used to estimate how quickly the water would move downstream and where. Next slide, please. This is some of the results of that model, the Icy Water model, and it shows the colored segments are the stream segments that would be where the water, where the plume would go in the 8 days following the spill before it got to Lake Powell down on the Colorado River. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is a simulation of something called the National Water Model, which is being used now in real time. Actually, this is being run for the whole country that you see, the whole part of the country you can see here. And it's being used to forecast floods. So this is being run at the NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and it's giving us very much more detailed forecasts for flooding. It's actually improved the spatial detail in flood forecasting by more than 700 times. So there is extremely great amount of more information in the flood forecasting models that they're able to do this way. So could we go to the next slide? So there are literally hundreds of other applications that have been built from the NHDPlus medium resolution. So we are hoping and expecting lots more applications to come from the high resolution NHDPlus. So I wanted to add just here a little bit of information about what we are calling the beta release of the NHDPlus high resolution. And that is that this is really the first iteration. The beta is the first iteration in what we hope to be a cycle of continuous improvement. So we do expect to find some problems, but we also hope that the data as it is pretty useful for a lot of purposes. We have really focused our efforts on making the new process for high resolution NHDPlus automated so that we can come back, fix the errors, and refresh within a really fairly short time period. So our goal is to get refresh done approximately 6 months after we release the beta data for any particular region. And we'll continue to do that afterwards as needed based on how much the data itself has been changed and how much it's been updated. So in this process, the user community, you folks out there on the landscape, are really critical to this process. We really need for you to download the data, use it, find problems, and tell us what you find, and tell us where those problems are so that we can fix that and get it improved. And really, it's only going to improve if people use it and provide us feedback. So don't wait until someone else fixes it, please. We really need your help to make the data better. And next slide. So next up, Ariel Dumboya is going to talk about the workflow and how we produce the NHDPlus High Res.
Thank you, Al. So this is a very high-level overview of what our workflow looks like, and this is for the build refresh process, and we'll talk more about what that refresh process means a little bit later today. So really, there's 5 steps to what we're doing, and we're going to focus mostly, or for my part, we're going to focus on these first 3. So the first thing we do is prep our components, so those ingredient data sets that Al was talking about, the NHD, the WBD, and the 3DEP data. And then we deliver them to our contractor. From there, that's where we actually build the NHDPlus High Res Beta product, and then they deliver that back to the USGS. From there, we go into our beta distribution. So this is where we're making the data publicly available and sharing it with all of you. And then we go into a QC process where we're engaging outside reviewers to help us improve that product, exactly what Al was just mentioning on his last slide. From there, we are implementing revisions to the NHDPlus High Res data, and that goes into our component data sets. And it may be the NHD needs updated, it may be the WBD. When we're working through this process, we're actually engaging with our stewardship community. So it's not necessarily USGS who will implement those changes, but we are working with our partners in determining which edits we would like to incorporate and who will be responsible for those. And from there, that's when we'll go into our next phase, which we'll talk about at the end of the presentation or near the end of the presentation, which is where we actually rebuild the NHDPlus product using those corrected component data sets to create the NHDPlus refresh version 1 and then distribute that publicly as well. What's really important about this process is that we were focused on engaging the medium resolution NHDPlus team, including Horizon Systems, who did much of the development work for that medium resolution product. And our goal was to really use what we had learned from that process to support the high resolution elevation and hydrography data. And for us, it was all about modernizing the process to support that high resolution data. So this is just one other view of our workflow, very much simplified. But you can see we have our ingredient data sets with the NHD, WBD, and our 1/3 arc-second seamless stem. That goes into the build refresh process, which is the actual software that creates the NHDPlus high-res data. And then we deliver that data to all of you as hydrologic subregions, or HU4s. So this graphic or map shows our current availability of data. But it's not just that focus. So one of the focuses of this slide is the data availability, but the second is about user engagement. So if you look at the blue areas that you see on the map here, this is where NHDPlus high resolution data is currently available, and we may also have some QC and review in work. We currently have approximately 20% of the coterminous United States HU4s available, and we expect to have about 40% coverage by the end of the year. In the green areas that you see on the map, this is where we'll be producing NHDPlus high resolution data at a later date. So these areas are currently open for NHD and WBD editing. So for those of you who are on the phone, if you're a part of our stewardship community and you have edits that you'd like to incorporate into the source data so that we can have that in the NHDPlus High Resolution product, these are the areas where we would highly encourage you to start performing that work. In the orange or the coral areas, depending on your screen, this is where we're preparing data for NHDPlus creation. And so we kind of like to limit editing in these areas, close editing a little bit so that we can prepare the data for delivery to the contractor. And then in the yellow areas, but really all areas, okay? So the USGS is actively seeking volunteers for our beta review and QC, and we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. So this is another look at that map, but here we have it in a tabular view. So this is essentially our current program of work, and it's in approximate priority order. There were a number of considerations when we determined this sequence, but overall this pretty much represents starting with some of our easier units first and consulting with some large projects that would need the NHDPlus high-res data. This also gave some of our other priority areas time to prepare their source data for the NHDPlus high-res process. So again, these items shown in blue here, same color scheme, are currently available as beta data. And then the following colors just represent our future plans, including some pilots in Alaska and Canada. And just to point out, all of this information is also available on our NHD website at nhd.usgs.gov. So feel free to go there, and we'll always keep this current. We're always posting updates as things develop and we have more data available. So next I'll talk a little bit about data access. So Al's kind of given an overview of the NHDPlus product overall. I've kind of given you a little bit about the workflow and production, but for those of you who would like to start downloading this data and use it, we'd like to give you some more information there. So this is our NHD website. On the left-hand side, there's a link that says Get Data Products and Map Services, and then from there you can link to our data products and services. Just as a side note for the services, that's currently NHD and WBD only, but we will have more coming soon for the NHDPlus High Resolution. So when you click on that link, you have two options. Both of these access the exact same data on the exact same server. So the first option is to use the National Map Download Viewer, and that's the item that's under the green box. And the second option is to download directly from our Amazon Cloud server, and that's the link in the purple box. And another note here is that for Department of the Interior users, you may find this purple link a little bit faster. So when using the National Map Viewer, really this is just an online mapping tool for downloading NHDPlus High-Res, NHD, and WBD, in addition to other national map themes, as shapefile or geodatabases. So NHDPlus High Resolution we have as file geodatabases, but depending on the products you're looking for, there are additional file formats. We also have a download manager, and that's very handy and allows a really convenient way to manage downloading multiple data sets, so you can kind of load everything into a queue and bulk download as many files as you would prefer. So this is just a view of the TNM download viewer. So when you open up this site, on the left here I've selected NHDPlus High Resolution Beta because that's the product that I'm interested in for today. And then I click on the Find Products button. And from there, depending on where I've zoomed in and what I have selected, you'll see that I have these two NHDPlus High Resolution Beta products available. And in this case, I'm interested in 0108. And you'll see there's two download options. So we have both the vector data and the raster data available for download. You can choose either or you can choose both depending on your needs. So the NHDPlus Direct Download link, so that also includes both the vector and raster components for whatever hydrologic unit you're interested in. And the vector data, as I mentioned earlier, and again, this is the same data on the same servers. There's just two different access points. So the vector data is a file geodatabase, and that's zipped, and the raster data are 7-zip files. So what do you get when you download this data and you unzip everything? So the vector data includes that file geodatabase. Within that file geodatabase, we have the hydrography feature dataset, which has all of our hydrography feature classes. We have our NHDPlus feature dataset, which has all of those feature classes. We have all of the WBD feature classes that you're used to seeing. But in addition to that, we also have these value-added attributes, and those are included as tables. So there's so much here, it's kind of hard to fit it all on the screen. And there's also so many attributes here, it's really hard to kind of go over the ones that might be relevant to everyone on the call. So for time's sake, I'm just going to highlight a few of my favorites that I find useful in my work and that I use on a regular basis. So the first one that I prefer to use on a fairly frequent basis is the NHDPlus EROM table. So what this does, this is our enhanced runoff model, and it gives flow estimates for almost every single high-resolution NHD flow line feature. And if you look at this graphic on the left, this is actually depicting the flow lines symbolized with those flow estimates from that model. The next one that I like to use a lot is the NHDPlus Flowline VAA table, and this one includes attributes like stream order, stream level, stream calc, but there's so many, oops, sorry, I went one too far. But we also have things like drainage area square kilometer, elevation. We have both the raw elevations and the smooth elevations, so those can be very handy as well. So I definitely encourage you guys to kind of download these, dig through them, and see which attributes you might find useful in your work. So that wraps up the vector data, but in addition to that, we have the raster download that I mentioned. So this includes a lot of the source data, so what did we produce these rasters from, in addition to things like a shaded relief for you, flow direction grids, flow accumulation rasters. But really, the power of the NHDPlus comes from the integration of the vector data that I mentioned, the raster data, and these value-added attributes mentioned above. So with that, I'd like to switch it over to Karen Adkins and Tatiana Damascio to talk to you a little bit about the beta review and the QC process.
Thank you, Ariel. How do I get it? Sorry.
There you go.
Apologize. Thanks, Ariel. So the beta data is ready to use, but we do know that the data may contain some defects. So we're asking the community to help us improve the data by performing quality control review on the beta data set. My name is Karen Adkins, and I will be discussing our overall workflow, our high-level process for the beta QC, as well as our current workflow that includes providing Esri map packages to help perform the review. Tatiana Damascio is going to take us into the future with the markup application, and she'll also talk a little bit about how to contact us if you're interested in helping with the review. So the NHDPlus High Res Beta QC is an important part of our overall process to improve the ingredient data set, in particular the NHD and the WBD. The NGTOC Partner Support Points of Contact, the POCs, work with the reviewers to identify issues, either on the ingredient data sets before the NHDPlus process proceeds, and that's what we're calling our pre-QC, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, or on the NHDPlus beta datasets themselves. The POCs then coordinate with production and our partners to ensure that the edits that were made by the reviewers are validated before going into the editing process on the ingredient data sets, and that's where we actually correct the data sets to make those improvements. And the process that we're currently using, this slide depicts our workflow that we're currently using. We are providing map packages to the reviewers. These map packages contain the NHDPlus Dataset, some helpful reference data sets as well. And it also contains empty feature classes so that the reviewers can add points, lines, and polygons to identify where there's problems in the data and also indicate how to fix the problem. And we're managing that through an ArcGIS online group. So we post the map packages, the reviewer downloads the map packages, then they perform the review according to the user guide that we've developed to help with that review. The yellow bubbles that you see in the middle of the screen identify some areas of review. The one area that is taking the bulk of the effort of the review is the isolated network QC. And that's where we're relying on a lot of reviewers who have local knowledge of their area so they can help with resolving some of those isolated networks. That's a really big, important part of the QC. Once the review is complete, the reviewer then repackages the data that includes the edits and any additional ancillary data sets that they bring into the map package when they're reviewing the data and post that back to the online QC group. So that's been an effective way for us to manage the review to date. We are changing that, and Tatiana is going to tell you about the markup application.
Thank you, Karen. This is Tatiana. As Karen mentioned, we'll take you to the future, and hopefully not too distant future. We are hoping to release a web application called Markup relatively soon. It's in the final phase of testing right now. And what this application allows us, and the community, it's a web-based, user-friendly tool that would allow somebody in the general public or our NHD WBD users to go in this web application and provide suggested corrections if they're seeing issues in NHD, WBD, or NHDPlus. We call in these suggestions markups, therefore markup application. Overall, the users will be able to view the layers, and they'll be able to view all the other markups that somebody has submitted in a certain area, and they will be able to create markups for existing features, so providing suggestions for corrections for existing features, or they will be able to also create markups for new features. So if they feel like a new feature should be added somewhere, they can create a markup for a new feature. So that goes into this web application, into a database. Internally, how do we consume those markups? We have an ArcGIS add-on in ArcMap, and this will be provided to our internal NGTOC editors, as well as our trained NHD and WBD partners in the States, who would help us to implement those markups into the ingredient data sets. So they will be able to submit queries to query the markups for the web application, and they'll be able to change the status for the markups. If they accept the markup, if it's validated, they'll flag it, and then they incorporate the change into the ingredient data set. They would flag it as resolved. If for some reason the markup doesn't get validated, it'll get flagged as one fix, and there will be a comment providing an explanation of why something has been declined. And then if review is in progress, then the markup will be flagged as in progress. So all of that will be reflected back into the web applications, and the users will be able to go in and see the status of their submitted markups. So we're very excited. We're hoping this will improve the process significantly, and it will play a key role in our NHDPlus high-res QC process. So I know both Al and Ariel and Karen mentioned getting involved. So if somebody is interested in helping with the beta QC review process, or in the future you have any other questions about applications that we're utilizing or the refresh process, you can contact your NHD and WBD point of contact. And how do you find that information? So on our NHD website, if you go to click on stewardship, there is a map. And this map allows you to access information for your point of contact, your technical point of contact, your principal steward in the state, and then your USGS national map liaisons. So, and you also will be able to read the stewardship MOU if there is one in place. So any of those points of contact should be able to direct you to the right person that should be able to answer your questions or help you to get involved. So if you click on that map, so this is an example of California. You'll see all the contacts are listed in a little pop-up box, and there's their phone number, email address, and you can contact them directly. Now we'll talk a little bit about the refresh process. You already saw this version of a slide. So right now we are using ingredient data sets and producing the beta version for NHDPlus High Res. We giving an opportunity for the community to get involved and provide comments for the beta version before we go through the refresh process to create the version 1. So this is what our refresh process looks like with the beta version in place. Once we eliminate the beta version out of the picture and version 1 comes into the picture, then we have this is what the refresh process looks like. What would trigger the refresh process? We have discussed determining some sort of detection change for our ingredient data set. So there is a lot of edits were done in either NHD, WBD, or 3DEP. Then there would be some sort of mechanism in place that would flag those areas for refresh process, and those are the areas that would get updated from version, whether it's 1 to the following version. And then if there is any, and we talked about the beta QC, the current process is once it goes through the QC review process and validation, we make the changes to the ingredient data sets, and that kicks off the refresh process to the version 1. Now I'll hand it back over to Ariel to talk about visibility filter.
Thank you, Tatiana. All right, so now this will maybe explain why the drainage area square kilometers is one of my favorite attributes. So the visibility filter. So the visibility filter is essentially an attribute that we've introduced into the NHD source data that's used for scale representation. This attribute is currently available in the NHD dataset, and it's applied to the NHD source data. This is a pre-NHDPlus process, and it is currently based on an NHD generalization process. What this attribute provides you is filtering of the data. This is not a generalized product. There's no actual removal of features or feature simplification. This is all about filtering the vector features. So what we have available for NHDPlus High Resolution is Region 1 and Region 6. We have populated this visibility filter attribute. And what that will provide you is a method to filter your vector features at approximately 8 approximate scales. So what the data has included is a coded value within this visibility filter attribute that will indicate that the feature is appropriate for use at the defined scale and all larger scales. This is currently available for NHD flow line, NHD water body, NHD area, and NHD line feature classes. So if you look at this table on the right, we've listed some of the scales that we have available. The visibility filter is the actual coded value or the domain that you would enter into that attribute field. And then we've also provided you with some sample queries that you could use. So for example, if you wanted to take a look at the NHDPlus High Resolution product and do a comparison to the medium resolution, you could put a display query, or you could also use a select by attributes query and enter visibility filter greater than or equal to 100,000, and that would show you all of the features that were appropriate for use at that scale and anything larger. So as far as current status of this goes, we're currently in an implementation phase. So this will become an automated process prior to NHDPlus High-Res creation. And the new process will allow the visibility filter attribute to be populated on the NHD source data, which will then become part of the NHDPlus High-Res product from those diagrams that we showed you with that ingredient data set. Ryan Teeter is leading this program with many others across the program, and he'll be populating this attribute for that NHD source data in the coming months. So just to give you guys a sneak peek, if you haven't downloaded the data yet, to see what it looks like, this is a 108, 0203, and a 8-digit hydrologic subbasin. And this shows the data with a display query for 24,000 scale. So this is showing everything that's appropriate for use at 24,000 and higher. If I switch that scale to 100,000, you can see some features start to be essentially removed, but they're not actually removed, they're just not displayed. And then 250,000, 500, 1 million, 2 million, and 5 million. So very quick, very easy, a very simple way for you to be able to go in and just query that data and select it for whatever scale you may need. So there will be future work that will involve generalizing catchments to filter both the catchments and the attributes. So those will match the generalized vectors, but that's more that we'll be working on as the NHDPlus program of work continues and we have additional coverage there. So just as a reminder, this is highlighting Region 6 and Region 1 for you, and this shows you where we have that visibility filter information available. You know, I strongly encourage you to download these data sets and really any other NHDPlus high resolution subregions you're interested in, and kind of look and see what it can do for you. Try out this visibility filter attribute, look at some of the other NHDPlus components, and see, you know, if that is something that can be helpful for you, like the EROM values. That's still one of my favorite, but I think the generalization and visibility filter is going to be my new favorite for my work. So lots of things to provide you there with the rasters, the vectors, and all of those value-added attributes, including this new one. So with that, I will switch it back over to Al.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ariel. So we're seeing quite a few questions coming in, both on the chat window and in the Q&A window. I gave you the wrong information initially and said chat, but either one will work if you can find either of those in the controls for the WebEx. Go ahead and put your questions in there. We're seeing quite a few questions come in, and we'll get to those here in just a moment. I just want to reiterate, if you are interested in helping us with the beta review and QC, if you are already know your regional POC for hydrography, you can go ahead and contact them directly, or just email nhd@usgs.gov and we'll get it forwarded to the correct people. Let us know in that email what areas in particular you're interested in doing the review on. Also, we'll have the recording for this seminar as well as all the previous hydrography seminars in our seminar series on the website that's indicated there with the link. There's always lots of information being posted to the NHDPlus High Resolution website, which has the link right there. Lots of information that's going on there, almost daily changing right now, so lots going on. So keep your eye on that web page. And lastly, you can always contact me if you have questions or want to talk to me directly. That's my contact information there. So now, Becky Anderson and Sue Budo are helping to manage all of the questions that have been coming in. So is it Becky, you're going to ask the first question?
Yeah, we have a question about documentation. What documentation is available for the NHDPlus High Res, and where can it be found? Okay,
I'll take that question. Yeah, so we decided to roll out the data before we had everything done. This is a beta product after all, so we're trying to provide access to the data as soon as we can. We have a user manual that is in development right now, and it'll be posted on the web page hopefully pretty soon. Initially, we're going to put up just the data dictionary portion of the user guide, which is kind of the most critical part. We hope we can get that up in the next few days. the rest of the user guide is going to take a little bit longer for us to get through the process. But we'll have more documentation there soon. You can always look at the version 2 NHDPlus user guide if you're confused about concepts, because again, the concepts are very, very similar. Just some of the data formats and a few the field names and so forth are different in the high res. So next question.
How about this one? Will you incorporate the 3-depth LiDAR elevation data in future refreshes?
Yeah, okay, I'll take that question as well. Yeah, so the 3-depth LiDAR data is continually being added to that 1/3 arc second or 10-meter resolution seamless national data set. So that's what we use for the NHDPlus high res, and so it's resampled. So if it's 1 meter resolution LiDAR data, it gets resampled to 10 meters, and that's what we're using at least for now for high resolution NHDPlus. At some point in the future, we'll probably change that to use the full resolution, but we wanted to at least get through the country once over and probably a couple of times over using the 10-meter resolution for now. But it does get represented in that data by resampling. So next question.
Yeah, this is Becky again. Will this data be available in a relational data format such as Postgres? We are exploring the types of non-proprietary data set formats that are out there right now. We have a project going on right now that's investigating that. But just so that you know, the data comes in file geodatabase, which is an Esri format, but you can load it into PostGIS. You can load it into QGIS. It goes in pretty easily into both of those open source packages. We'll try and get a link somewhere on the web page to point you to some information about specifics of how you do that. But the file geodatabase format that we're currently releasing is usable in those open source packages. But yeah, we do plan to continue that research and offer some other formats in the future.
Okay, next question. How will you coordinate edits between volunteers using the markup tool and edits made by NHD stewards?
Okay, so basically that markup tool, let's see, the tool that is, I forget the name of it, if we could go back in the slides to Tatiana's slide that shows the web markup tool, and then there's another tool that the stewards will see all of the edits or all of the markup that, yeah, it's called the desktop application there. So stewards, anyone who does a checkout of NHD data or WBD will see any of the markups that that anybody has put in through the web application. Is that right?
Yes. So Al, this was designed to be a companion to either NHD Update or WBD, whatever types of edits you want to be doing. So essentially, the editors will be doing their work like normal, whether they're internal or external, and there's a button that you can press that says Show Me Markups, and that's essentially what it will do for you and show you the markups in your area. And you can choose to complete those markups while you're doing your regular edits and then just status them properly, please. Or you can choose to disregard them, and we'll be coordinating those through our other processes with our stewardship point of contacts and by reaching out to the stewards in those areas. But they go hand in hand, they're companions. Does that, I hope that answers everything?
Yeah, I think that does.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another question. Do you expect QC review will result in changes to NHD and WBD or only to the specific NHDPlus products? Let's see, there are some changes that we expect that would be made to the specific NHDPlus products, such as the burn line event and sinks. But for the most part, we expect most of the edits are going to be done to the actual NHD or WBD. Is that, Ariel, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that is correct, Al. We anticipate that most updates will occur to the ingredient data sets.
So what criteria are used to define the visibility scales?
So we actually did not have enough time, unfortunately, to cover that in detail today. I would highly recommend, if you'd like to learn more about generalization and the visibility factor, that you visit our NHD website. We have a page there that is dedicated to the visibility filter information. We have referenced some works by Larry Stanislawski and others who have led their research over the last few years on implementing this process and defining the rules and the criteria. We will be providing additional information coming up soon. We'll have some dedicated webinars happening and some presentations specifically on the visibility filter, the business rules, the logic, how it's applied, how it's updated, how it's maintained, et cetera. So more coming very soon there. But for now, NHD website, I think /visibility filter or something similar to that.
Okay.
So how does the incorporation of LiDAR-derived CEM and synthetic stream network geometry play into NHDPlus HR?
So what we're planning to do is we're working toward a point where we will be getting our hydrography derived directly from LiDAR DEMs, and but that process right now is not completely laid out. I would say there's still some research questions to be done there. If we happen to have LiDAR-derived hydrography that has been carefully quality controlled and put into the NHD, then and the elevation data is also coming from the LiDAR, it will work pretty well as our current process stands. So ultimately, what we hope to do is make the process faster, getting hydrography derived from the LiDAR DEMs. But if we have that kind of data right now, it will work quite well with the current process. Next question.
Sure. Will the data be available as a web service and kept up to date with that service or via that service?
Do you want to take that one, Ariel?
Yes, I can. So we're currently developing NHDPlus High Resolution web services. We have a couple of things that we've implemented so far. We don't have any cached base map caches yet. We have a dynamic WMS service that we're currently using for the markup application. Because of what Tatiana mentioned earlier, that we're in the final stages of wrapping that up and getting that deployed. We're still in development on that, but we will be making web services available to the public for NHDPlus High Resolution in the coming months.
All right. Do we have time for maybe just one more, Al, you think?
Sure.
All right. What are the major differences between the NHD 24K and the NHDPlus HR data, aside from the value-added attribute tables?
Okay, I'll take that. So the major difference is that we have catchments and we have raster data as well. We have the flow direction, flow accumulation grids. And then the other difference is sort of in the vintage. So the NHD High Resolution is a continuously updated product, whereas the NHDPlus High Resolution is based on snapshots. So we take a snapshot of the NHD High Resolution. the WBD and the 3DEP data, and we embed that into the NHDPlus High Res. And so that is a static snapshot from that point on for that version of the High Resolution NHDPlus. Whereas all of those other data sets, all those 3 ingredient data sets, continue to evolve on an almost daily basis. So that's another one of the major differences.
Do we have a second for one quick last one that'll kind of move us into what's next?
Sure.
Two related questions: devoting webinars to demonstrating value-added attributes and/or seminars that go into greater detail, well, again, on value-added attributes, less on workflow and development coordination, but more about using the data set and the utility of the data set.
Okay. I think that's great feedback, and we'll definitely try to do that here sometime in the fairly near future. We're going to do another, basically repeat of this seminar, since a lot of people were not able to attend today because we actually filled up our phone line. So we'll plan on doing that, and then we'll try to provide another seminar in the near future after that, and talk more about kind of applications and how to use the data. All right, I think with that we are going to conclude today's seminar. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any more questions or feedback, please give us send us an email. Again, nhd@usgs.gov is probably the best way to contact us. Or you can contact me directly if you have feedback you'd like to give to me directly. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.